Hello to everyone. Singapore is an island nation located in Southeast Asia, just 135 kilometers south of the Malay Peninsula from Ecuador, one of 3 city-states in the world. In other words, it is dominated by a single city. And that's Singapore, which gave the country its name. It has an area of 728.3 square kilometers. The country's furthest point from each other is only 49 kilometers. The country's overseas neighbors are Malaysia and Indonesia. The journey from Europe to Singapore takes approximately 11 hours without a direct stop. The time difference between the two countries is 5 hours. Singapore is famous for its strict and interesting bans. The most popular ban is the ban on chewing gum, which is imposed throughout the country. While some bans may sound a bit of an exaggeration, the state applies a zero-tolerance policy to those who break these prohibitions. Punishments range from fines to whip jail to death. Before describing the life in the country and the interesting bans imposed, I need to briefly mention the history of Singapore. An incredible success story lies behind the fact that this small country is one of the cleanest, richest, wealthiest and lowest crime countries in the world today. Singapore is one of the most impressive examples of economic growth. First of all, the country is a country that has reached the position it is today from scratch. In other words, we can say that it is a country that has come from nothing, everything only by its own efforts. In 1819, English Stafford Rojas came to these lands and established a harbour here, and the foundations of British colonialism that would last for about a century and a half were laid. Even though Japan invaded Singapore between 1942 and 1945, the country's lands were again under British domination. When Singapore joined the Malaysian Federation in 1963, when it gained independence in 1965, few countries thought they could survive, because it had neither industry nor natural resources. On top of that, it had a poor and uneducated population of very different ethnic origins. In other words, it did not have a common culture. It was a country that was completely dependent on foreign countries and could not even produce drinking water. The only thing the country had was people. That's why the state invested in people. A reliable legal system, cheap labor, low taxes, and a talented public that became educated over time made the country a center of attraction for foreign investors. According to the Ease of Doing Business Index ranking, Singapore is the second in the world today. Singapore's main advantage: it has the world's busiest and second largest commercial port, one of the world's most important financial and freight transportation centers. The founder of the country, which now holds the title of the world's longest-serving prime minister, said, "I always want people in Singapore to have an exceptional quality of life." And he achieved this goal in a short period of 30 years. Meanwhile, some of the people saw him as a dictator. But if we look at the current state of the country, the people of Singapore have benefited more than they did. The world economy is mentioned as the Asian tigers along with Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan and South Korea. This is because of the high growth rates and rapid industrialization of these 4 countries between 1960 and 1990. We'll look at the demographic structure of the country. Singapore is a country without a common language, ethnicity, culture and historical identity. So it has a very diverse cultural structure. Actually, there is no such concept as Singaporean in the country. Everyone is people who have immigrated from different countries. The total population is 5.6 million. 74% of the population is Chinese, 13% Malay, 9% Indian. The remaining 4% are made up of other nationalities. The country has no official religion. 34% of the population is Buddhist, 18% is Christian, 14% is Muslim, 10% is Taoist, 5% is Hindu, and 1% belongs to other religions. The remaining 18% do not belong to any religion. The people of Singapore are an educated people. It's based on problem solving, not rote memorization. They have one of the best education systems in the world. The literacy rate is 97.3%. But rather than that, the general culture of the people is highly developed. They even know little about a country on the other side of the world. The people are hardworking and disciplined and have an intellectual character. Singapore is trying to be the best they can be in every field, doing the best they can. The British call this country with 2 meanings. It means both a good city and a penal city. To daily life in the country. If we look at it, the country has 4 official languages. Standard Chinese, Malay is spoken mostly by Hindus, and English is widely spoken in education and business, as they grew up as a British colony, while most of the people generally have at least 2 languages. You can see the texts in 4 languages on the subway or any sign. If you speak English, you can communicate with everyone in the country. But spoken English is a little different. By adding some words from other official languages, they created a dialect of their own called change. However, this does not prevent you from communicating. The currency of the country is Singapore dollar, and 1 Singapore dollar today's exchange rate. Singapore is written on all coins, including coins, in all 4 official languages. While the $2, $5, and $10 banknotes are made recyclable from plastic, larger banknotes are made from paper. Their largest banknote is 10,000 Singapore dollars. However, this banknote is only taken with a special reservation at the bank, and when the money is given, the identity information of the person receiving the money is also taken. In this way, money can be found easily in case the money is lost or stolen. Today, the country is second in the world in terms of gross domestic product per capita. But there is a great income inequality in the country. The reason for this is that there are many super rich people living in the country. There is no such thing as a minimum wage. With 5,783 Singapore dollars per month, the country is one of the countries with the highest average salary in the world. 20% of the income of citizens of the country necessarily goes to a savings account. People can use this money for their needs such as health expenses or buying a house, and the rest when they retire. The unemployment rate is 3.2%. This is one of the countries with the least poverty. Beggars and homeless almost none. A house where even the poorest person in the country can get ahead on with government support. It has access to top quality healthcare and education. Singapore is the 3rd least corrupt country. The country's prime minister is the world's highest paid country leader. Her annual salary amounts to about $1.7 million. Although the people of Singapore are richer than most people, many things in the country are quite expensive even compared to the people. This is the 4th most expensive city in the world. There are a lot of people working in Singapore and living in Malaysia. They move back and forth between the 2 countries every day. There is a great shopping spree among the people. There are 171 shopping centres in the tiny country. But in Singapore every people just go shopping because the thing is too expensive. He goes to his border neighbours Malaysia or Indonesia, the other closest country. This is one of the most expensive countries in the world to buy a car. As the country is a small island nation, the state keeps taxes too high to control car use. Car prices start from 100,000 Singapore dollars, and it means you have money. It doesn't mean you can own a car the next day. First you need to fill out a form and queue. The number of people waiting in line to buy a car in the country also affects car price. People often rent cars instead of buying them. Because the value of the car decreases every year, and 10 years later that car is removed from the traffic. Let's say you bought a car for 100,000 Singapore dollars. The value of that car drops by 10,000 each year, losing all its value 10 years later. At the end of 10 years, there are 2 options. Either take your car for scrapping and give it a no statement, or renew the 10-year use tax. But when you renew, you have to pay much more than the first tax you paid. The state doesn't want old cars. Since there is a parking problem in the country, another of the necessary conditions to buy a car is to declare a parking place that you can use continuously. Your car is regularly inspected for keeping it clean, and if it is not clean and well maintained, a hefty fine is imposed. Meanwhile, the steering wheels are on the right and the traffic flows on the left. Also, wearing a belt is mandatory even in the back seat. One of the things that visitors to the country say is that Singapore is one of the most boring regions in Asia. The biggest reason for reaching this conclusion is, of course, I will explain the prohibitions. All these prohibitions apply not only to the people of Singapore, but to anyone visiting the country. The reason Singapore is so clean, flawless, and successful is because of its discipline. The state prohibits anything that could lead to a ban from happening. For example, throwing gum on the floor may be a ban, but chewing gum, selling gum, or even bringing chewing gum with you is prohibited in the country. The reason is, of course, environmental pollution. For medical reasons only, chewing gum is permitted by prescription and is only sold from pharmacies. The penalty for chewing gum is 1,000 Singapore dollars, while the penalty for introducing chewing gum into the country for commercial purposes is 100,000 Singapore dollars. When they enter the country, they can give you a test if they wish, and if the test results in a banned substance in your blood, the situation goes to jail. Anyway, the punishment for the use and possession of drugs in the country is not money, but execution. Not only are you paying a $1,000 fine, you also have to work in public service for 12 hours, wearing a vest that has been shown to be suspended from outside. The penalty for spitting on the ground is again 1,000 Singapore dollars. In fact, most movements that would normally be against society are illegal. There are sensors in some elevators, and if someone urinates in the elevator, the doors of the elevator lock and do not open until the police arrive. Wherever you are in the country, it is forbidden not to flush in all toilets. The penalty is around $150. Not even closing the toilet seat is illegal in the country. Meanwhile, public toilets are free all over the country. It may sound strange, but gossip is also prohibited in the country. Let's say someone talks back and forth about you. This person can easily complain. Since lying to justice is a huge crime in the country, nobody can understand this situation. Since 2019, the sentence for spreading fake news on the internet is 10 years in prison. All kinds of things that might hinder the happiness and peace of another person in the country are to be prevented. It is forbidden to sing abusive songs in public. If you disturb someone by playing an instrument badly, that also gets punished. Up to 3 months imprisonment or a fine. Websites, magazines and films with explicit content are prohibited in the country. For example, let's say you open curtains in your home and get dressed. If someone sees you naked and denounces you, you will be sentenced up to 3 months in prison or a $2,000 fine. Homosexuality is also prohibited in the country. His sentence is 2 years imprisonment. Taxis are only known from the taxi station. So it is forbidden to hail a taxi on the road. Even if the street is empty, the penalty for crossing the red light and not using a pedestrian crossing was 20 Singapore dollars for the first time, 1,000 for the second, and 3 months for the third. Those who drive with alcohol are fined between $2,000 and $10,000, or imprisonment not exceeding 12 months. In addition, the person is banned from traffic for 2 years. If you follow the same crime for the second time, the fine this time varies between $5,000 and $20,000, and an additional 2 years of imprisonment is given. In addition, the penalty for being banned from traffic increases to at least 5 years. Smoking is strictly prohibited in all public places. It can only be drunk in designated areas. The penalty is 1,000 Singapore dollars. By the way, someone who comes to the country can bring at most 1 pack of cigarettes. It has to be open too. It is normal for people to have their bags open on public transport or in cafes. Let's say you forgot your phone or wallet on the table in a cafe. You can find it at the same place when you return a few hours later. Because aside from theft, nobody touches someone else's private belongings. The penalty for unauthorized internet access in the country is 11 Singapore dollars, or 3 years in prison. One of the most popular fruits in Singapore is burrito. The world has a very important place in Malay culture. It is even considered sacred in some regions. But this fruit has a very bad, irritating smell. Therefore, shopping malls for public transport. This fruit is even forbidden to put in bags. In fact, this ban is not just for this fruit. It applies to anything that smells bad. Even if you smell bad, and people are disturbed by these, even this is enough in subways to get a penalty. The penalty for eating and drinking is $500. Another interesting ban in the country is feeding birds. The reason is, of course, the environment is desired. There's a $500 fine. All birds in the country are fed specially. There is no investment way to buy a house in the country. For example, let's say you have a house, and you will get married. But the person you marry also has a house. You cannot have 2 houses after you get married. The government requires you to sell a house. In this way, that money is returned to the country's economy in some way. By the way, foreigners cannot buy a house in any way in Singapore. Everywhere in the country belongs to Singapore. More than 90% of the country's citizens are homeowners. And 80% of these houses are state-built residences. In fact, these dwellings are not fully sold to people. It can only be rented for 99 years. If your life ends before your lease ends. Since the real owner of the house is the state, you do not leave it as a legacy. There are no neighborhoods such as slums in the penalty for knowingly and willfully damaging a person or a public property, jail and whip. In 1994, an 18-year-old American teenager was sentenced to prison for damaging public property, as well as a lash sentence. Even if the President of America intervened, he could not prevent the punishment. In 2015, 2 German teenagers received the same punishment for making graffiti on the streets. There are many examples like this. The punishment for crimes such as rape, money laundering and deliberate killing is execution. In fact, the main reason why the country is so disciplined, clean and has a high level of welfare is that it shows zero tolerance for prohibitions. You might think you will see it while throwing garbage on the ground. But thanks to the cameras in the country, you can catch it very easily. In addition, there are WhatsApp complaint rights accessible to the public. So it is quite simple for a citizen to complain about you. These prohibitions, which are interesting to us, are actually the rules that should be according to the Singapore. Because they are educated and growing with this awareness. Today, tourism is one of the most important sources of income in the country. In addition to its features, the country benefits from tourism as it is located on countries such as Australia, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, or popular holiday routes such as Bali. Singapore has the best airport in the world since 2013. Changi Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, is much more than an airport. The lush green image of the country can be seen from the airport. There are butterfly gardens, cactus, orchid and many other botanical parks. Moreover, the world's largest indoor waterfall is located here. The water flowing from this waterfall is entirely made up of rainwater. It has art centers, entertainment areas, free cinemas, game halls, and even a pool. Meanwhile, the Singapore passport is the strongest in the world after Japan. One of the most popular places to visit in the country is the botanical gardens, which are on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Singapore itself is like a botanical garden anyway. You can come across different plants that you have never seen while walking around. One of the signature buildings of the country is the Marina Hotel, which hosts the world's most famous pool at the top. If this made futuristic you see, is actually not for visuality, one of the biggest problems of a country is water scarcity. This structure was built to collect rainwater and use it in irrigation. By the way, there is no agricultural land in the country. Almost everything is imported. In addition, the country has a tropical climate. Throughout the year, hot humidity is high and it receives abundant rainfall. The maximum temperature difference during the year is only 3–4 degrees. Today, the biggest symbol of the country is an imaginary animal whose head is a lion and the rest consists of fish. According to the rumors, when the Indonesian prince came to these lands in Shame in the 14th century, he saw lions and combined the area with Simha, meaning lion, and Kurai, which means city, and named Singapore, the Lion City. Over time, this name turned into what it is now. I hope you like. Singapore was one of the countries that you love to tell me the most. You comment my narration to other countries. Don't forget to write it down. In the meantime,